This is one of the back paws of the famous Sphinx on the Giza Plateau. And the story of its age has been controversial for a long time, but we have geological evidence, as in geologists' professional opinions, about when the initial carving would have been done. So what you're looking at behind me, of course, is the erosion. This is limestone, probably an ancient seabed. And the erosion, you would think, would have been the result of wind, blowing sand over the course of, say, a few thousand years to do that. But Dr. Robert Schoch of Boston University, who is an expert on the weathering of stone, has stated for many years that this is the result of precipitation. This weathering is from water. So, as you can see, it's a desert now, but 8,000 to 10,000 years ago, it was savanna, it was grasslands, maybe even tropical. So this weathering means that this was actually carved out, that this work was done at least 8,000 to 10,000 years ago, and that dates the Sphinx at being 8,000 to 10,000 years old. Several thousand years older than the dynastic pharaonic culture of Egypt. As you can see, the weathering on the body is much greater than the weathering on the head. And basically, only the head has been exposed for any significant amount of time. Usually the body has been covered in sand. So how can you explain that the body is more heavily eroded than the head is? And really the only logical explanation for that is the fact that the head has been recarved at least once, if not many times, because the proportions are way off. The body of the Sphinx, including the tail, the feet, and the torso, etc., are in reasonably good proportion with one another, but the head is much, much smaller. So based on scientific evidence of Dr. Robert Schoch and supposedly at least 200 other geologists from around the world, the weathering of the Sphinx and the weathering of the Sphinx enclosure is the result of water weathering, and that could only have happened at least 8, maybe 10,000 years ago. And that dates the Sphinx at that age, because the Sphinx had to be cut out down into and open up to create this enclosure. It wasn't, as you can see, the Sphinx is not on the level normal ground, it's sunken down. And so these walls here, all of this was carved out in order to shape the Sphinx as we see it. And the other intriguing thing is that the Sphinx temple, which is in front of the Sphinx, is what is composed, or where the stone from this area was used. And those stones are megalithic, multi-ton. So the people didn't simply carve the Sphinx out with primitive tools. They cut multi-ton blocks out, moved it, or them, all to the front, and created, supposedly, the Sphinx temple from that. That is a major engineering achievement, not something that a Bronze Age culture, such as the dynastic Egyptians, probably were capable of.
Well, here we are between the paws of the Sphinx, and this is the famous temple related to Tefnut. This temple was constructed from limestone, and you can see, such as that corner over there, that the whole temple was once cased with rose granite. There is a massive cut also on that northern wall. It's all one sharp, clean cut. And it's supposed to be a ceremonial temple, but we know that it's part of the dynamic of the design itself, and both of them were connected. As we see, the same kind of structure is laid. Also, this temple connected white calcite, so perhaps also the floor of it was made with white calcite, like the very temple on the other side.
And are there shafts within this structure?
I didn't examine this one from the inside before, but there is others there is shafts inside the other one, and I'm sure there is in this one in some spots. They are connected actually from behind this wall. There is an access to the other door inside the Valley Temple.
But we realize that the Egyptians had brought megalithic pieces of limestone weighing more than 20 tons. This is the miracle because in modern time we can't find such huge pieces. Yes, we have so many quarries of limestone, but to find big blocks like this and to manage to cut this megalithic piece nowadays, I think it is impossible. Maybe in granite, yes, we can do this, but in limestone, no, because limestone in the quarries, we can cut blocks like 5 tons maximum, okay, or 2 tons or 3 tons, but more than 20 tons, this is impossible, in my opinion.
So, to encapsulate what has been said, as I walk past the tail of the Sphinx here, the body of the Sphinx was dug out of the bedrock. Only the head was exposed. Geologically, that's called a yardang. It was originally just a knob above the ground. But the carving of the Sphinx's body wasn't simply done by chipping away into the bedrock. Multi-ton blocks, and what Mohammed said, at least, or possibly as big as 20 tons, were removed, and the Sphinx temple was created from those blocks. And based on the weathering and erosion of the walls here, that was done by water, not by wind and sand. And the only time that could have happened where there would have been so much rain to erode the bedrock would have been at least 8,000 years ago. Now, as far back as the dynastic Egyptians go, the first dynastic Egyptian was believed to be a ruler about 3100, maybe 3200 BC. So we're talking roughly 5,000 years. So at a minimum, the Sphinx is 3,000 years older than the Egyptians. And therefore the question is, who made it? And who removed the multi-ton blocks to create the Sphinx temple? One answer is that they were called the Cometians. And for more information about that subject, please look up www.chemitology.com. So what Yusuf Awiyan just pointed out is that the Sphinx temple, which is in front of the Sphinx, and the Valley temple, which is to the right of its head, actually most likely were contemporary. The Sphinx temple looks much more eroded than the Valley temple, but the Sphinx temple was much more, how shall we put this in a nice way, recycled as compared to the Valley temple. The Valley temple still has its mega tonnage blocks of engineered granite standing in sockets in the ground, but all of those were taken out of the Sphinx temple and recycled to make statues, other parts of buildings. And the thing is, it's not simply that that would have been done, say, by the Greeks or the Romans. It may have been done even farther back in time than that.
We're here at the Sphinx, in the back of the Sphinx, the rump of the Sphinx. In 1987, there was an NBC special with Zahi Hawass, Mark Lane, and narrated by Omar Sharif. They had come back in and just had recently discovered this block came loose and there's a tunnel underneath. And it went down there, and of course it ended in water. And it's a major tunnel, according to the indigenous tradition, from the Sphinx that leads to all the pyramids, directly to the Great Pyramid. And so they went down there and they found water, and they said, oh, they didn't know how to explain it. And some people believe the Sphinx may be hollow, but there's definitely water still coursing. This is a major water line underneath the Sphinx because she was part of the energy field. And obviously you see, since then, they've put a block here so they don't want anyone else to discover that fact, that under the Sphinx is a massive amount of water table, running water, the underground Urnil, the water. And she controls the energy of the Giza Plateau. That's why she was constructed first.
So Stephen, when you're talking about the Sphinx being the symbol of the Great Mother, and also actually, if you can just go ahead and talk about that and relationship with water, etc.
Well, again, we're talking about a great ancient matriarchal society. So to them everything was the Great Mother. Nut, who it is, represents the sky. We see her on top of coffins in the dynastic period by the Hanut to use her to people going to return to. We always know we're going to return to Mother, the source. So the indigenous tradition again is when Nut wanted to manifest on the planet physically, she spit. Spit, our expectorate, cannot be measured. It has no volume or weight, so you can't define the Great Mother. But if you can, they built the statue. And so they directed on this the major zone, the major vortex, the major power place of the Giza Plateau, because this limestone outcropping was here 56,000 years ago, Hakim tells us. And people came before she was the Sphinx just to bathe in the energy. They known, and it's also been suggested for maybe previous life cycles. People came here, knew this was a power place, an energy zone. The major water channel running right under here leads to where they eventually built the pyramids. They built the pyramids where they are exactly to be under the water tunnels coming from the Sphinx. So, according to indigenous tradition, as the Great Mother, she controls all the energy that comes into the Giza Plateau. And in my opinion, this is the #1 power place on the planet and has been known by indigenous people, as we said, previous life cycles, at least 56,000 years, if not more.